Hi there, and welcome to this session on developing a signature assignment for the 2020 Innovation Institute. My name is Matthew DeSantis. I believe I know most of you who are participating in this year's Innovation Institute, but for those of you who don't, I am the Director for Institutional Assessment, and my office, when we get back to living on campus or working on campus, is in Fremont Hall. If you have any issues with assessment or uh, outcomes or curriculum mapping or anything along those lines, always feel free to reach out outside of what we're going to talk about today, which is developing a signature assignment. And so I'm excited about talking about this with you and working with you over these next couple of days to develop a high caliber signature assignment for your class and for your program. So the first question that many people ask is simply, what is a signature assignment? And you can see here the AAC&U definition, American Association of Colleges and Universities. They're the organization that really was pushing out these ideas of signature assignments probably as close to 10 years ago. So this is not a new idea, but it is one that has started gaining a lot more traction over the last several years within higher education. It's actually something we see quite a bit doing in the K-12 world as well. So as the definition states, it's requiring students to demonstrate and apply their proficiency in one or more key outcomes. And it's doing that by culminating this knowledge that they've learned throughout a particular course or a sequence of study in a program. I think for the purpose of this discussion, though, it is important to differentiate between a signature assignment and signature work. So signature work is another term that you will frequently hear. Signature work refers more frequently to a culminating project or a culminating experience, the type of assignment you would find in our culminating experiences at St. Edward's. Signature work is something that pulls together the student's entire background of learning at the institution within a particular program or curriculum. Signature assignments can be a signature work. So if there was a Venn diagram, you should probably think of it as not all signature assignments are signature work, but all signature works are signature assignments. Okay, so signature assignments can take on the mantle of a signature work if given at a culminating course at the end of a program or curriculum study. Otherwise, otherwise signature assignments are simply those that you're giving in 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 level classes that might be helping bring together and tie together several themes or one particular theme, an outcome that you really wanted to emphasize in the class. So as we go through, it's just important to differentiate between signature work, which is something that is, like I said, typically takes place at the 4,000 level for culminating experiences, versus signature assignments, which, like I said, can be a signature work, but are also at the lower level in terms of courses. If you are in a situation where you're developing an assignment for a 4,000 level course for a program to assess a particular program outcome, then what you are going to be doing through this development of a signature assignment is ultimately going to become some type of signature work. So how do we begin framing and understanding a signature work? The first thing that I would say is to begin with the end in mind. It's important before you set out developing an assignment to have a sense of what the outcome is that you are interested in measuring a student's proficiency in. This is something I taught political science for most of my career before transitioning into assessment. I still actually teach global studies here at St. Edward's. And one of the things that I think is a challenge, at least it was for me early in my career in particular, was I would just come up with neat ideas for an assignment. And then I would kind of shoehorn in the outcome that was associated with that particular assignment. So a good example of that might be something where I would often teach international relations class. And in that international relations class, we would do a Model United Nations simulation at the end of the semester. It was a fun assignment. It was something I enjoyed because I participated in Model UN competitions when I was in high school, and I was an advisor to the Model United Nations Club at the college where I was teaching. So it was a fun activity. It was also a good way to recruit future students into the Model UN Club. And students love the assignment. And so on one hand, I would say, well, that was a really successful assignment. But on the other hand, it was just an assignment that I created, but I didn't think through what outcome is this really emphasizing? What outcome is this reinforcing? What outcomes can I measure through assessing and grading and evaluating how students are performing on this particular assignment? I never really gave that much thought. And of course, I guess the lucky part for me was that there were ultimately several outcomes that could be used in this type of a simulation. I could very easily assess oral communication, problem solving, critical thinking, teamwork. These were all really important ideas that were being manifested in this particular assignment. However, I hadn't scaffolded anything in the class to lead the students up to that point. I had with knowledge, we talked about how does the UN work? How does it operate? What are what are these resolutions that they're doing? So on and so forth. But I didn't build them up from an outcomes standpoint throughout the semester. And so that was a real problem. It's something we'll get into in a little bit more detail here in a second. But begin with the end in mind. Don't start with, this is a neat assignment. Think about what outcome are you interested in measuring? Are you looking at critical thinking? Are you looking at problem solving? Are you looking at communication? Are you looking at something very specific from a disciplinary standpoint? Okay. What is it that you are trying to assess? And to that, the second bullet point is mapping the connections between course, program, and potentially general education outcomes. Are you trying to assess a course SLO? Are you trying to assess a program SLO? Are you trying to assess a general education learning outcome? All right. Or are you trying to do perhaps multiple, that the course learning outcome maps to the program learning outcome, and that might map to a general education outcome. All right. So how do we think about that? So mapping the connections to these to see how are these all related. Okay. And then finally, you really want to take a look at the rubrics that have been developed for those particular outcomes, and the level of the course should be considered prior to the assignment. So you want to take a look, if there is a rubric that has been designed to assess that particular outcome, you want to look carefully at that rubric. I don't think anybody will mind sharing if I share this story, but this past year we went through our first year of assessment into the new general education curriculum. And towards the end of the year, actually right before we had to transition to remote instruction in March, we gathered several dozen faculty together to go through norming exercises where they assessed one or two pieces of student work with the St. Edward's University critical thinking or intercultural knowledge rubric associated with those general education learning outcomes. Really fascinating thing happened. I was in a room of faculty who were norming scores for assessing intercultural knowledge. And there was a faculty member in the room who actually had one of their assignments for the norming exercise. Of course, everything had been anonymized and names had been taken out and things like that. But the faculty member was very honest about saying, oh, this is from my class, actually. And we went through the exercise of scoring how the student performed on each of these different dimensions. And the faculty member at the end said, I have to rethink how I want to develop this assignment moving forward, because I think this student did a really good job on this particular assignment. But this student did not display the level of proficiency I thought they should have been able to display based upon the rubric. In other words, this was a good assignment, but it was an assignment that may not have aligned very well with that particular rubric. And so when you use the assignment and evaluate students for intercultural knowledge in this particular case, You may be looking at some, some disparity between the assignment and the rubric. And so it's important to always look at the rubric, understand it, and say, what is it trying to measure? Does this share my understanding of that outcome as well? In other words, I think I know what I mean by critical thinking, but oh, wow, I didn't realize this was the definition that we have here for critical thinking for our general education learning outcomes, all right? And that's something that can be very specific, obviously, to a gen ed situation. But if you're doing program learning outcome assessment, do you have a rubric for those learning outcomes within your program? Do you have rubrics for learning outcomes within your course? The answer to that might be no, and that's not the end of the world. But if those are available to you, take a look at them and make sure that your understanding of what the outcome is actually lines up with what the rubric says the outcome is, because that can really play a critical role in how you want to develop this assignment over time. So what are some general rules? First of all courses can use signature assignments, from the 1,000 level to the 4,000 level. As I said earlier, some are signature work at the more culminating level, but signature assignments can be used throughout. As I see here, though, attention should be paid to course sequencing. You want to make sure that when you're developing an assignment, you have a good understanding of what students in your class have already accomplished before, and perhaps what they're being scaffolded up to afterwards. It may be unfair to develop a signature assignment around a particular outcome that the student has not yet been introduced to. They are only getting introduced in your class. Now, certainly there can be a great deal of learning that takes place over a span of 15 or 16 weeks, but that can obviously be a significant challenge. And so if you know students have not yet been introduced to a particular concept, this might be more applicable to something very disciplinary specific. If you know they've not been exposed to that concept, then developing a signature assignment around that concept might become slightly difficult. Or you might just simply expect lower scores and just kind of recalibrating what you would expect from your students at that time. Understanding students might not develop a level of proficiency yet after the culmination of only 15 weeks. You might be getting them on their way, they might be progressing nicely, but again, just understanding and contextualizing where they are at that particular time. On the other side, if you are teaching a 3,000 or 4,000 level course, you're probably relatively confident that students have been exposed to multiple ideas and skill sets over time. So whether these are big ideas like critical thinking, communication, teamwork, problem solving, or something more disciplinary based, you can probably be pretty confident that by the 3,000 level, these students have at least been introduced to this concept and probably at least had one class that has helped reinforce this idea, so that the idea of developing that signature work over the course of a semester is much more feasible, and you can expect a higher level of proficiency out of students at the end of the semester. All course assignments should be evaluated for whether they support the signature assignment. This is a really important idea. And this is something that I was getting at earlier when I was talking about my Model UN assignment that I had in my international relations class. That was not an assignment. That simulation was not an assignment that had been scaffolded up to the entire semester. It was something that I just kind of put at the end of the semester. And the students hadn't practiced those skills leading up to that particular assignment. So they had very limited presentation assignments. So they didn't get up and talk in front of the class and, formally. We had a lot of class discussion, but in terms of formally standing up, presenting information in a clear and concise way, understanding professional modes of communication, we didn't do a lot of that. And so now suddenly at the end of the semester, here's this assignment that's asking students to get up and give speeches about international policy in front of their peers. That's going to be a quite daunting task, especially if you've not built them up to that point, okay? I also had a really limited amount of team building exercises. I didn't have a lot of group work that was going on in the class. And so as I started to evaluate the effectiveness of this particular assignment, again, I realized the assignment wasn't so much the problem. It was everything that came before the assignment was the problem. And it really forced me to retool the rest of my class in a lot of ways. And so I started to rethink about, well, I need to make sure that they have a couple of opportunities before the simulation to get up and talk in front of the class. I need to make sure they have a couple of opportunities to engage in group work and have group dynamics. These were really important things that they needed to develop so that they could be successful with the signature assignment. I think that's a really important concept to understand, that if you're trying to build up to this signature assignment at the end of the semester, everything else you're doing that semester needs to be in some way reinforcing and scaffolding up to that moment in time. The assignment, as I said, serves an opportunity to assess students at the culmination of a course or a program. It's important that a signature assignment really should be taking place at the very tail end of the semester, okay? In terms of the placement of that particular assignment. You really do want it to be week 12, 13, 14, 15, or even kind of after the last day of class, something, final project or a final exam of some type, or something in the graphic design world or art world, perhaps some sort of an exhibit or a portfolio that is a final project. But you want to be building up to that at the end of the semester. Those assignments that you're giving the first 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks of the semester, they're important. They're there to help build up to that point of that signature assignment, but the signature assignment ultimately should be kind of the crown jewel of the course towards the end of the semester. So what are some examples of this? And there's several different disciplines. We can pull different examples, and we'll go into some more specific details of examples here in a second. But just in terms of a broad brushstroke across different disciplines and areas, certainly things like essays, lab reports, or research papers really are things that tap into that disciplinary knowledge and apply theory and data to their analysis. I was a political science major, and that was something that was always drilled into me as a student, both in undergrad and graduate school, and something I tried to kind of replicate in terms of research papers, and kind of getting that disciplinary knowledge and making sure that they do have a solid understanding of theory, or of how to apply data and how to kind of apply theory to the real world and those sorts of things. So, in behavioral social sciences, sometimes, like I said, that can take the form of a research paper. In the natural sciences, a lot of times lab reports are where that might come in. Essays, I think that could be true across multiple disciplines in different areas. I'm going to give a little bit more of a specific example here in a second, but solutions to a realistic math problem, and demonstrating that ability to problem solve and apply to other areas of life. Photographs, graphics, artwork displayed for display and critique. As I mentioned earlier, developing a portfolio that students are building up toward at the end of the semester is a really great example of a signature assignment. Obviously, service learning and field experiences also tend to be good signature assignments that actually double as signature work as well. A lot of times it is building up to that field experience, something like an internship opportunity, or some sort of a work study program, or shadow program. Those are really great opportunities to see the culmination of students' abilities at the end of a program. And that's something that, obviously, if we're navigating this new world, how this is done online, I can just say, I just got done speaking with a group of I4 interns through the I4 grant that we have over in the natural sciences, and all of them are engaging in remote internship experiences this summer. So that sort of field study, that service learning, that internship experience is still something that is valuable, even though we might have to do it remote and virtually. And I think that actually, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second, I think the use of technology might actually bring about an even more interesting element of assessment. And like I said, I'll touch on that a little bit more. And the final point I had here, the final example, poetry, fiction, posters, other forms of writing to address disciplinary knowledge and critical thinking. And so, like I said, those are maybe some more examples from the humanities. But again, this doesn't have to be something that is produced at the end of a particular program of study, but simply at the end of a first year, our first time through creative writing class, something like that. So here, what are a couple of real kind of in-depth examples? So I'm going to give you one from a STEM example in the natural sciences, which really focuses on quantitative reasoning and communication. In this particular one, a math instructor created a signature assignment where students acted as potential car buyers, and they calculated how different interest rates would affect the amount of money they spent. Now, the interesting part of this assignment, really I think made it very cool, was the students played two roles. It was actually a role-playing assignment that they would go through in class, where one student played the buyer and another student played the seller. And so they were both trying to, negotiate. So there was an element of negotiation there. They were trying to talk about how different payment methods might be more appealing to different options. So, well, if you give more money up front, if you give more of a down payment, then we can reduce your interest rate a little bit more. But if you're not able to do, that sort of thing. And so it was, like I said, it kind of reinforced communication in terms of just interpersonal communication. It reinforced this idea of practically applying mathematics in the real world. This was for an introductory math course. So these are largely non-majors who are taking this, but showing the practicality of the discipline and showing how to communicate with people about that discipline. How do you communicate figures, numbers, quantitative reasoning, but also kind of played out in real world scenarios. And so it was something that they kind of built up to throughout the semester through a variety of, always trying to apply mathematics problems to real world situations rather than simply, y equals mx plus b, or kind of what you traditionally associate with perhaps college algebra or an intro level mathematics course. So I think this was a really great example of taking a couple of skills that they wanted to emphasize: communication, quantitative reasoning, problem solving, and going, okay, what's a neat assignment that we can do that engages students in these skills at one time, and how can we then build up to that point in the semester? Another example from the humanities focuses more on creative and critical thinking. This is one where a faculty member had their class visit landmarks throughout the semester. So it was getting out into the real world, going out and looking at landmarks. This was actually an assignment done at the University of Texas by an art professor there. And so this professor went out and got their class out and did kind of a slow looking exercise where they would tour students of first impressions of works of art. Again, this is more of an introductory level course. I think it was a 2000 level art history class, but a lot of non-majors in the class. And they would spend 3 to 5 minutes kind of quietly looking at an installation in the surrounding environment. And then they'd have a group discussion after that, there in that space. And then they'd have a kind of a written reflection as part of that assignment. It wasn't an extremely long assignment, but it was something of practicing this skill of creative and critical thinking, of looking at a piece of art, looking at a landmark, understanding why its location is important, what is it meaning, what is it symbolizing, talking with others about it. Again, building up that communication ability. It's not just about, I'm looking at this piece of art and I understand what it means, but then how do I communicate that with others? How do I have a dialogue with others about how these ideas have affected me in some way, or the meaning that I'm deriving from those? Okay, so again, building up throughout the semester, this instructor had several slow looking exercises throughout the class and had kind of been prompting students throughout the class to develop those skills. This was kind of towards the end of the semester, actually going out into the real world and applying those skills in real time. It should be pointed out that both of those, despite this last example being something where people were out interacting with the world, both of these are examples that students can easily do in an online setting. And that's not something that should inhibit your development of a signature piece of work. So what are some of the better or worse practices within signature assignments? Well, like I said, I think a good practice is developing an assignment that is authentic to the course. Don't force something on. I've seen that happen a lot where people will develop assignments that aren't particularly aligned with the concept, or they're not aligned with the particular learning outcomes, but it's a neat assignment maybe, or it's an assignment they've seen at a conference or a colleague, or they've seen it online and they go, oh, that's a really neat assignment. I'm going to do that in this class. Is it authentic to this class? Is it authentic to you as an instructor? I think that's a really important part that people don't always give enough credit to. Sometimes you have to lean into your strengths in the classroom. I think we all know that. We want to work on those areas where we might be a little bit more deficient, but ultimately you need to be authentic to who you are in the classroom and the types of assignments that you're comfortable with. And so fashioning something around that that will get those students to that place is really an important point. Using technology to enhance your assignment. To my point earlier, technology should not inhibit your ability to develop these signature assignments. They should actually be helping. So in a time like this, when we are doing remote instruction, potential flex instruction, who knows? But I think it's important to always keep that in the back of our mind. Even if we return back to face-to-face classes and things return to a relative sense of normal, pretty soon, I still think it's important to think about, how would I transition this to an online setting? What are the resources that are out there for me that students could, that could even enhance this assignment a little bit more? I think one of the things that I've learned in my experience, I was fortunate enough to have taught online at another university. I taught face-to-face and online courses there for about 6 years. And so one of the things I learned was that the better I got teaching online, the better I got teaching face-to-face. That I started realizing there were all these amazing resources online that I was connecting my online students to. And I realized that, oh, why am I not just connecting my face-to-face students to these same resources? These are amazing pieces of technology, whether it's software, whether it's, like I said, additional kind of virtual resources, or virtual tours that you can take of famous museums or historical landmarks, or presidential galleries and presidential libraries, things like that. I mean, these are all really neat ways to engage students and get them kind of out of a rut maybe, or to get out of the monotony of consistently doing the same thing over and over again. And then the final good practice here, creating realistic assignments that can be easily adopted into a class. You don't want to shoot for the moon. You want to develop something that is realistic for the level of class that you're teaching. If you're teaching a 1,000 level class, you need to think about developing a 1,000 level assignment. And sometimes that can be frustrating because we start getting ideas. And when we get those ideas, we want to build on those ideas even more and more. But it's important to understand, where is that student? It goes back to, where is that student coming from? What level of experience do they have coming into this class? And where can they reasonably get by the end of the semester? And developing an assignment based on that. The bad practice is just basically the inverse of everything I just said. So not developing assignments that are aligned, and letting technology limit you. I think one of the really unfortunate things I've seen in my career when I started teaching online was using our learning management system at another institution. Faculty started getting really scared about Americans with Disabilities, the ADA compliance. And they would be really concerned about this. And their response to it was not to make this rich, dynamic classroom for students with disabilities. It was to strip everything down and just be a bunch of links and Word documents and nothing else. And that's really unfortunate because there's great technology out there, there's great resources out there that allow you to have this really enriching and fulfilling course for all students to be inclusive. And so don't let technology limit those assignments and those opportunities. And then, like I said, don't overwhelm yourself or your students. And so part of the building up to a particular assignment is, perhaps a signature assignment might look daunting to a student the first day of class when you're going over the syllabus. it's important for you to talk to that student and talk through about how I'm going to build you up to get you to the point where that is not an overwhelming or daunting assignment, that you can do that. And I think that's a really important message to send. So what are some next steps? Well, I'd like for you to review the additional information that I have included in the Canvas page. I'd like for you also to disregard the barking of our Jack Russell Terriers that you might hear in the background. I believe there's probably a FedEx person arriving at the house, and it is very disruptive. But nonetheless, we will persevere. So review the information, like I said, in the additional resources section. There are some links there that I think are really helpful for you. And particularly, there's two really great links. One is a sheet that is given out at the University of Missouri at Kansas City that talks through what is a signature assignment and how to create a signature assignment. That's a great resource. It's a great document to take a look at. The other is the page at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. For those of you who are interested in assessment and developing rubrics and developing learning outcomes and thinking more about assessment, the University of Hawaii at Manoa has the best assessment website in the country, hands down. They are fantastic about sharing resources. They're great about posting stuff online. They have a great interface for it. So I linked you to a particular page they have about signature assignments, and there's a video and a PowerPoint to go along with that. If you're interested in learning more, I encourage you to do that. But then there's a treasure trove of other information on that particular site that, like I said, if you're interested in those different aspects of assessment or pedagogy, it's a great resource for you just to bookmark and come back to later. Then I want you to reflect on how the ideas could be used for your course or program or study, and select an outcome on which you want to base your signature assignment. So you want to think about, what are the ideas, what are the outcomes that I am focused on for this particular class, for this particular program, and then how am I going to develop a signature assignment around that? Again, remembering, beginning with the end in mind. What's the focus of the outcome, and then developing an assignment around that. And then in terms of additional work or your kind of assignment associated with this section, I would like for you to post your signature assignment in the discussion board associated with this section, and respond to the prompt. And so the prompt simply asks you to maybe reflect a little bit on the development of that signature assignment, and the instructions for it and the outline of it, and then also to respond to someone else and help your colleagues out as you go through this. So it can be an iterative process. Certainly nothing is ever done until it's all the way done. And I know that you're going to be developing a lot of things throughout this class and during the Innovation Institute. But like I said, work on developing that outline of a rough draft of what your signature assignment might look like, and reflect and talk to others, so that this is a process that can be ongoing over the summer and even into the next semester. So I will conclude there. If you have any questions or at all, feel free to contact me, reach out to me. As I said, my name is Matthew DeSantis. You can reach me at the email listed here, mdesant1@stedwards.edu. One day I will work at an institution, and I hope it is at St. Edwards, when my entire last name can actually be on an email. Until then, we will just stick to mdesant1 and hope that's good enough. But feel free to reach out to me. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. And if you have any additional questions or have trouble accessing those resources, again, let me know, or feel free to contact Rebecca Frost Davis or Jennifer Jefferson. Thanks so much, and all the best.